Subscribe now. Don't miss any story. Share your thoughts or reflections in the comments. It all started on a regular Sunday afternoon in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of day where you think nothing out of the ordinary could ever happen. The sun was warm, filtering through the blinds, and the house smelled faintly of the cinnamon candles I like to light on weekends. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, trying to keep my mind off the growing silence in my marriage. I had been married to Robert for nearly 6 years, and while things weren't terrible, they weren't what they used to be either. We had grown comfortable, too comfortable, and slowly the spark that once pulled us together had dimmed into something like habit. Robert had a son from a previous marriage, Jason. He was 22, recently back from college, and temporarily living with us until he figured out his next steps. I had known him since he was 15, a shy, polite teenager who always kept to himself. Over the years, we had developed a respectful, cordial relationship. Nothing more, nothing less. I was the woman who married his dad. Not his friend, not his mother, just someone in between. But lately something had shifted. Jason had matured into a confident, thoughtful young man, and I started to notice how his eyes lingered on me longer than they used to. I brushed it off as imagination at first. Surely he was just trying to be helpful or kind. He'd compliment my cooking, offer to help around the house, ask about my day in ways Robert no longer did. It was subtle but persistent, and eventually, I stopped pretending I didn't feel it too. One evening, Robert had gone on a business trip. Nothing unusual. He was gone often, and I had gotten used to the empty bed, the solitary dinners, and the hollow silence of a house too big for just one. Jason had been out for most of the evening, and I assumed he'd be home late. I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch with a book, and tried not to overthink the way my heart felt a little lighter when Jason was around. I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear his footsteps. I only realized he was home when I looked up and saw him standing in the doorway to the living room. He was watching me quietly, a strange expression on his face, something between hesitation and resolve. "You okay?" I asked, setting the wine glass down. He nodded slowly, walked into the room, and sat beside me. The couch sank under his weight, and I suddenly felt very aware of the thin fabric of my pajama pants and the loose neckline of my shirt. It was nothing inappropriate, but I felt exposed in a way I hadn't felt in years. There was a long silence before he spoke. "Can I tell you something?" he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Of course," I replied, my voice barely steady. He turned his body slightly to face me, eyes locking with mine. "I don't want to make things weird, but I think about you. A lot." My breath caught. I wanted to laugh it off, tell him he was young and confused and that this was crazy. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. My pulse quickened. "I know you're married to my dad," he continued, "and I'm not trying to disrespect that. But I see you. I see how lonely you are. And I feel it too." His words hit harder than I expected. 'Cause he was right. I was lonely, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional isolation I had grown accustomed to. Robert was distant, absorbed in work, and we hadn't connected in what felt like years. "Jason," I began, but he held up a hand gently. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said. "I just needed you to know. And if you want me to stop, I will. Swear. Just say the word." But I didn't say the word. Instead, I stayed silent, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. He leaned in slightly, not enough to be inappropriate, but just close enough for me to feel the tension between us. And then, with a deep breath, he whispered, "Don't move." My body tensed. My mind screamed at me to stop this, whatever this was, but my heart stayed quiet. He slowly slid off the couch and onto his knees in front of me, eyes searching mine for permission. And even then, even in that moment, I could have ended it. I could have stood up, walked away, reminded him that I was his stepmother, that this was wrong. But I didn't. I let him stay there, kneeling in front of me like someone seeking redemption or forgiveness, or maybe something much more dangerous. He reached for my hand and kissed it softly. The gesture was gentle, reverent, not lustful, but it was charged, electric, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Wanted. I've thought about this moment for weeks, he admitted. Not to cross a line, but to just be seen by you. Tears welled up in my eyes. I hated myself for not stopping him. I hated myself for wanting to be seen, to be desired, even if it was by someone I had no right to feel anything for. But I was only human. A woman buried under years of indifference, of routine, of being invisible in her own life. I didn't sleep with him that night. I told him he needed to go to bed, and he did, respectfully, without protest. But something between us had changed. A dam had cracked, and it couldn't be unbroken. The days that followed were a blur of avoidance and stolen glances. I couldn't look Robert in the eye. He came back from his trip like nothing had changed, like the life we were pretending to live still held meaning. But I had changed. Inside, I was spiraling, caught in a storm I had helped create. Eventually, I told Jason we couldn't be alone together anymore. That this needed to stop before it became something we couldn't undo. He nodded. He understood. And slowly, he began to spend more time out of the house, looking for jobs, staying with friends. But the damage was done. Not to my marriage, which had already been falling apart, but to my conscience, to my sense of who I was. Months later, Robert and I separated. Not because of Jason, but because we had been broken for a long time. The incident with Jason had simply brought the truth into sharp focus. I had been emotionally abandoned, and I had clung to the first person who made me feel like I still mattered. I haven't seen Jason since the divorce. We never spoke of that night again. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks of it, or if it was just a fleeting fantasy for him, one he grew out of like a phase. For me, it's something else entirely. A memory that reminds me how powerful loneliness can be, how dangerous it is to be unseen for too long, and how one whispered "don't move" can shake your entire world.